Gaze upon this image of the Arabian desert, and you'll witness one of history's most ambitious construction projects taking shape. A 200-meter-wide trench stretches from the Hijaz Mountains to the Gulf of Aqaba. And that's not all. Observe this, the initial phase of what will become the largest set of foundations ever constructed. Now that the concrete has cured, the first vertical structures are poised to emerge. In essence, the endeavor that everyone dismissed as impossible, as something that could never be built, is actually materializing. Or is it? While proponents suggest vertical construction could commence by the end of this year, experts in real estate warn that hope is not a strategy. For every sign of progress, there are persistent budget issues threatening to bring the entire project to a standstill. Saudi Arabia has reportedly asked consulting firms to conduct a strategic review of the line, and rumors even circulate that the entire undertaking has been cancelled. But what do we truly know? The year 2026 is poised to be a make-or-break moment for the line. This is when deadlines must be met, and progress will be measured in height, not just hype. Regardless of your opinion on this project, or even its realism, a nation's future hinges upon it, and a leader has staked his entire reputation on its success. They declare it can be done, but such declarations cannot persist indefinitely without tangible proof. So, will it ever truly be built? Let's find out. For those unfamiliar, this is the line, Saudi Arabia's blueprint for a colossal linear city. If, or when, it's completed, it will serve as the capital of Neom, a vast new region in the country's northwest, conceived by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. It forms a cornerstone of his Vision 2030, an ambitious plan to diversify the country's economy away from oil dependency by, you guessed it, 2030. The figures behind the line are staggering. It's projected to be 200 meters wide, 500 meters tall, and span 170 kilometers across the desert. The sheer scale is difficult to comprehend. To provide some perspective, consider this small Lego model of the line, built to just 2 bricks high. This model represents a mere 0.03% of the actual line's size. To further illustrate, this would be the Empire State Building, which the line would absolutely dwarf in height. Just imagine its incredible length. The burning question, shared by many around the world, is how on earth do you construct something of this magnitude? Let's begin with the fundamentals. The line traverses wildly varied terrain, hard mountain rock, soft open desert, and salty coastal plains. To build anything across such a diverse landscape, you first require a uniform, stable foundation. That's where the foundations come in. Imagine building a skyscraper on unstable ground. Much of the line's site sits atop quaternary deposits, essentially loosely deposited, uncompacted material unsuitable for bearing significant weight. Beneath this material, however, lies solid bedrock, an ideal surface for construction. To reach this bedrock, engineers employ what's called a piled raft foundation. This involves creating a robust concrete slab at ground level, with the building's weight transferred through piles driven deep into the stable bedrock below, bypassing the weaker upper layers. The result is an exceptionally strong and stable base for any skyscraper. This might sound straightforward, but it is far from simple. Designing foundations for any structure, let alone one of this size, demands immense calculation. The work currently underway on the line surpasses anything ever seen before. Phase 1 alone has involved driving over 16,000 piles up to 70 meters deep into the Saudi sand. This equates to nearly 1,000 kilometers of drilling, consuming up to 3.5 million cubic meters of concrete. On top of this, an 8-meter-thick raft will form the base for all subsequent construction promised by this colossal project. To achieve this, an automated factory is mass-producing tens of thousands of 32-meter-long rebar cages to reinforce each pile. Simultaneously, drilling rigs utilize GPS for precise boring of the holes into which these rebar cages are lowered. A biodegradable liquid is then pumped into the holes to prevent collapse before the concrete is poured. Engineers aren't just contending with soft earth. Being so close to the sea, this stretch also requires protection from highly saline groundwater. If left untreated, it could corrode the steel cages and concrete piles over time. To combat this, the world's largest dewatering system has been implemented. 500 wells were drilled along this section of the line, each fitted with a water pump at its base. Water is extracted at a rate of 90,000 cubic meters per hour, directed towards a settlement pond where its quality is rigorously checked. From there, the water is filtered and discharged into the sea via a series of pipes. Work on the foundations for Phase 1 is nearing completion, meaning the project is about to reach its next major milestone, going vertical. On a typical skyscraper, this involves constructing the core, the building's essential backbone. These cores, often seen rising on construction sites, are formed by pouring concrete into a mold that is incrementally pushed upward by hydraulic jacks. However, the line introduces a unique twist. Remember, the line is a city, a framework, not a single monolithic building. It doesn't possess one continuous core stretching for 170 kilometers. Instead, it's composed of thousands of individual cores, each built much like any other. Crucially, these cores support the primary decks of the structure, which will serve as the main streets and avenues, with the cores acting as cross streets. Imagine the Manhattan grid, but folded and stacked vertically. Within this framework, the city will truly come alive, housing schools, hospitals, homes, and transport infrastructure, everything required for a functioning metropolis. This framework is what is currently under construction, 2 rows of 500-meter tall towers. Phase 1 will see 4.8 million tons of steel outrigger beams hoisted into place to support the 5 decks running through each module. Typically, in skyscraper construction, steelwork and cladding begin to be added at an earlier stage, following the core up the building. This is why 2026 is so anticipated. Things should really start to take shape, and we should see rapid progress. But can it actually be built? That's the trillion-dollar question. Let's start with concrete. Pouring concrete at scale is incredibly complex. Pour it too slowly, and it sets unevenly. Pour it too fast, and the ingredients can separate. If the mixture is too wet, the concrete will be brittle, too dry, and it will resemble Swiss cheese. Essentially, it demands absolute consistency over extended periods. Millions of tons of concrete have already been poured, which is a solid track record. But this has primarily occurred on the coast, with easy access to supply lines. The city still has a long way to extend into a vast hinterland with no local material access and a near-total lack of one vital ingredient: water. There is a plan. It begins at Oxagon, another of NEOM's megaprojects, where a massive desalination plant is intended to pump billions of liters of seawater to reservoirs distributed along the city's length. These reservoirs would feed a $190 million network of concrete factories capable of producing 20,000 cubic meters of concrete daily. But there's a significant catch: none of this currently exists. Work on Oxagon only began in mid-2025. Those vast concrete plants are still a distant prospect, and concrete is currently produced locally, with water shipped in by tankers, by no means a scalable solution. In fact, unconfirmed reports have recently surfaced suggesting the desalination plant has been quietly abandoned. This isn't merely nitpicking. The line has extremely ambitious targets to meet in less than 9 years. The NEOM Stadium is slated to be suspended 350 meters in the air inside the line and is set to host games at the 2034 FIFA World Cup, games for which people will be buying tickets. For this to be credible at this stage, one would expect to see far more evidence of scalable activity. Instead, as of late 2025, the project appears to be constructing anything, just to gain momentum and silence critics. So, what exactly are they building? What is this Phase 1 we keep mentioning? When you saw the massive trench in the desert, what did you imagine would be built? The entire structure? Half of it? At least a quarter? No. Despite constructing that enormous 170-kilometer-long cutting through the desert, they are actually only building Phase 1, a mere 2.4 kilometers of the line. While this is still an absolutely massive building in its own right, it accounts for less than 1.5% of the entire line structure. This might feel a little underwhelming, but there is a strategic rationale. The NEOM team is using Phase 1 to construct some of the city's largest and most spectacular anchor assets. An anchor asset, once completed, attracts investment and development to the surrounding area. A prime example is the High Line in Manhattan, a derelict elevated railway transformed into a public park, which subsequently revitalized the surrounding area into one of Manhattan's most expensive and coveted neighborhoods. The entire structure of the line is divided into 800-meter-long modules, akin to neighborhoods or city blocks. Phase 1 will see 3 of these modules built near the western end of the site, featuring some of the city's most spectacular elements. These include a man-made marina capable of hosting the world's largest cruise ships, the 46,000-capacity NEOM Stadium, and a vast chandelier hanging below, designed to welcome people into this colossal structure. NEOM's stated goal is to fund and build a collection of anchor assets around which subsequent phases will organically develop. In many respects, this strategy makes a lot of sense, being sophisticated and based on industry-wide standards. Where it becomes questionable is that this is a 170-kilometer-long city in the desert. The line is intended to be a revolutionary city that redefines urban living in the most audacious way possible, forever changing how we perceive our cities. For an ambitious leader with unchecked power, it's precisely the kind of project to capture the world's imagination. But for everyone else, it carries immense risk. Development is ultimately a game of finances, and in this case, the purse is controlled by one of the planet's wealthiest individuals. However, fully realizing Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's vision will require more capital than he alone possesses, necessitating significant buy-in from private markets, external capital partners, and foreign investors. These investors generally seek more realistic assumptions. Furthermore, the project's leadership faces the challenge of pushing back against some of the prince's more fantastical visions. A simple change of mind, like wanting a curve or a jump over an obstacle, could translate into billions of dollars in cost overruns and months or even years of delays, which is not conducive to large-scale development. Ever since its announcement, the line has faced intense criticism regarding its alleged human cost. There have been reports of homes, schools, and hospitals being cleared, allegations of modern-day slavery on sites, and orders to execute tribal people who refuse to relocate. These allegations are vehemently denied by NEOM and the Saudi Arabian government. Beyond this, it has been exceedingly difficult, if not impossible, for journalists to gain real access to the sites, though relationships with the press are handled very differently in Saudi Arabia. Yet, this wall of silence casts a shadow over the project's fundamentals. Many individuals involved with the line were contacted for this video, and almost none would speak for fear of reprisals. The hard truth is that as Saudi Arabia strives to become a more progressive society and transform its culture as part of Vision 2030, it will need to master its relationship with the free press beyond its borders. People asking questions about this project often encounter a clash of cultures. They seek to understand why costs have tripled, why elements have been replaced or changed, or why there are no updates on certain aspects, but they are dealing with a place accustomed to not having to answer to anyone. If the line does get built, it won't be the first showpiece city constructed from scratch. Consider Brasilia, founded in 1960, which replaced Rio de Janeiro as Brazil's capital. Like the line, it was built in what was perceived as a remote and inhospitable location. And even more like the line, the city's plan was unlike anything seen before. Designed in the 1950s, the jet age, when rapid advancements in aviation symbolized the cutting edge and the futuristic, Brasilia was meant to represent a nation reborn in the modern era. It was designed like an airplane, government buildings in the cockpit, housing on the wings, and a military district in the tail. The fuselage formed a monumental axis uniting the entire city. Just like Brasilia, the line is an attempt to create a new, forward-looking symbol for a nation. But rather than gazing skyward, it draws inspiration from the pages of science fiction. An academic and author, Chris Habelsgray, who has written extensively about cyberpunk, received an email from a Saudi Arabian woman inviting him to discuss input on the line's aesthetics, making it clear that the Crown Prince was very interested in cyberpunk. The line itself appears to be partly based on elements from Snow Crash, a novel where a virtual reality world was constructed around one long, almost infinite virtual street. Even if you're not familiar with the term, you've likely encountered the cyberpunk aesthetic everywhere, from video games to TV shows and films like Blade Runner. Chris was one of a handful of people asked to provide background research for what is now known as the line. He collected numerous images and quotes from cyberpunk and related science fiction writings that he believed would be useful, specifically focusing on urban planning and ideas of cyberpunk and other punk genres. He recounted that the prince attended a demonstration or exhibition of these ideas, primarily featuring large images. The prince then selected what he liked, and these choices were theoretically incorporated into the plans for building the entire city. Looking at some of the images Chris shared with Neom, you can see the clear link with the concept images released in the early stages of the line. If there's one aspect of the line that seems directly from a video game, it's the distinctive mirror finish covering every exterior surface of the building. Reflective glass is not new, but it comes with disadvantages. The type used on buildings is made by transferring metal deposits onto glass through a highly charged gas, a process called sputter coating. While efficient for large-scale production, it's slightly translucent and reflects, at best, around 40% of light. In other words, it's never as good as a true mirror. This is Moriah, a remarkable building constructed in 2019, widely believed to be a key inspiration for the line. Initially, it was clad in polished metal sheets, but these quickly deteriorated in the harsh, sandy environment. For a perfect mirror finish, you need a mirror. But mirrors are fragile. In the extreme desert heat, the lamination that binds them can fail, and the silver coating can peel away from its backing. To produce something that could withstand these conditions, an entirely new type of mirror was developed. Normally, mirrors are made from standard glass, large sheets are produced, cut to size, and then coated with a silver finish. However, to survive extreme temperatures, this glass would also need to be heat-treated or tempered. The mirror coating could only be applied after tempering, but tempered glass cannot be cut. So, to produce the mirrors for Moriah, the entire production line had to be reversed. The raw glass was first precisely cut to its final size, then heat-treated, before being returned to its initial factory for the new mirror coating. Along with a silver spray, the mirrors were coated with copper to provide resistance against intense solar radiation. The result is what you see today, a surface with over 90% reflection that can withstand some of the Earth's harshest conditions. Speaking of harsh conditions, here's a major one: the line will not be air-conditioned. That's right. The absence of outdoor cooling was confirmed in a presentation by the line's chief development officer earlier this year. It's crucial to remember this isn't a building, it's a city. So, inside your home or office, you can have as much air conditioning as you desire. But out on the streets, you will be subject to the ambient desert temperature. And if that weren't challenging enough, it could be exacerbated by the urban heat island effect, a phenomenon where cities absorb and retain heat much more dramatically than rural areas. In hot weather, for instance, London can be up to 5 degrees Celsius warmer than the surrounding countryside due to its heat-absorbing concrete. And the line will feature a lot of concrete, steel, and glass. This is a significant concern, but currently, all we have is an assurance that this has been thoroughly considered and modeled, and that it will all be fine. One argument made is that the mirror finish of the line's walls will reflect so much light that the city won't absorb much heat. We are also told the glass will be breathable, to allow air to pass through. Whether this means the vast walls will have vents or if an entirely new material is being invented remains unknown. It doesn't exactly inspire optimism. It appears life in the line will largely be confined within its modules. Each is designed to contain all basic amenities, accessible within a short walk. Essentially, it's an extension of the 15-minute city concept seen in places like Copenhagen or Zurich. But for this to be feasible, you must be able to move around without melting. And if you need to travel further, you'll require some form of transportation. Before delving into how transport will function, we need to understand why the line is, well, a line. Apparently, we've been designing our cities incorrectly. Consider London, home to about 8.6 million people, just shy of the 9 million people who could ultimately reside in the fully realized line. London sprawls across a sizable chunk of southeast England. Now, compare that to the line. The argument is that London represents the old way of building cities, unplanned, sprawling, and inefficient. Wouldn't it be much neater to house all those people in this sleek, technologically advanced structure? To achieve this, one key element needs to be eliminated: cars. Cars, while a major contributor to Saudi Arabia's wealth, are being dismissed as obsolete for the future. They consume vast amounts of space, cause accidents, require parking, and transport few people. The line promises something far superior. At its base, you'll find the line's high-speed railway, connecting the international airport to its western tip. It's supposedly designed to complete the entire 170-kilometer journey in just 20 minutes, faster than any existing train today. Above this, the line's general mass transit system, a suburban-style rail network, will have stops every 1.5 kilometers. Then, distributed between the line's 5 primary decks, a light rail network will stop every 100 meters. A series of escalators and lifts will connect people between the different levels. This transport system is touted as one of the line's major selling points, claiming its linear shape offers a better, more efficient urban concept. But is that truly the case? To answer that, consider Apple Park, Steve Jobs' last great creation. It shares similarities with the line in its simple, all-encompassing structure, but it's circular. This was deliberate, as a circle embodies certain ideals. In a circle, there's no hierarchy, no top or bottom, no coveted corner offices, and the space inside is equally shared. It's also efficient for navigation. The furthest anyone has to travel is a straight line from one side to another, the building's diameter. Now, look at the line. To travel anywhere, you primarily have only two options: head left or head right. In contrast, a radial city offers movement in every direction, meaning the average journey will always be shorter. Let's revisit those transport options. We're told we'll be able to traverse the entire 170-kilometer length of the line in just 20 minutes. The China Railway CR450AF, the world's fastest train, though still in development, will have a top speed of 450 kilometers per hour. Even this train could not cover the line's length in 20 minutes, without accounting for acceleration or deceleration. Moreover, this high-speed line will only have 2 stations, making it largely impractical for residents in the middle of the city. For them, the alternative is a suburban train that stops every 1.5 kilometers. How efficient is that? So, where do we stand? We began this discussion by noting that the line and the broader NEOM project are part of Vision 2030, a plan to completely re-engineer the Saudi economy by the end of the decade and safeguard the country from economic ruin. That clock is ticking, and we don't even know if Phase 1 will be completed by then. Just a few months ago, a detailed investigation by the Financial Times claimed that top-level executives were privately admitting this project was impossible. This is truly the crux of the entire scheme. When announced in 2021, the line's ambition was so audacious it made headlines worldwide. It compelled everyone to debate what our cities should look like. It inspired children and engaged them in the story of our future. It was so radical it felt almost confrontational, daring people to dismiss it. And with every drone shot showing progress, every satellite image, these were presented like victory laps over those who lacked faith. But we are 5 years in, and this project truly needs to start showing tangible progress. 2026 is being touted as a pivotal year, when things are truly supposed to take shape. But if that doesn't happen, then all bets are off. It's tempting to think that if anyone could build something like this, it would be Saudi Arabia, with its unchecked power and vast resources. But as we've seen, it's not solely up to them anymore. Ultimately, it all boils down to money, and while the purse is controlled by one of the richest men on the planet, fully realizing the crown prince's desires will require more capital than that purse holds. It will necessitate significant buy-in from private markets, external capital partners, and foreign investors. Generally speaking, these entities seek more realistic assumptions. Even if it does get built, the question of livability remains. Will this be a functioning city? Will it be a place people genuinely want to live, or merely visit? Some experts suggest there's a very tiny chance, perhaps 10%, that in 10 years, there might be some facilities and a segment of the line where wealthy individuals marvel at it, with ongoing promises of further construction, resorts, and more refuges. Most likely, however, much of it will be abandoned. There's no question that if this project is completed, it will be one of the greatest achievements in human history, the modern-day equivalent of the pyramids. But that is a very big if. This project has its roots in cyberpunk, and the next year will be decisive in determining whether it remains mere science fiction or becomes science fact.